Hi, you're listening to Redneck Theology, a short program providing a common sense look at Christianity. I'm your host, Bill Whitty. Questions or comments may be emailed to rednecktheology@gmail.com. Now, on with the broadcast. To shine or not to shine? The purpose of this broadcast has been and still is to promote the gospel of Jesus Christ in basic common sense speech. By doing so, I hope a portion of those who have not considered Christianity or who have already rejected it will decide to become Christians. In reality, the majority of the listeners either are or consider themselves to be Christians. This particular subject today affects the majority of listeners more than the admitted non-Christian. It is intended to, as usual, present a common sense attitude, which I hope will be taken to heart where and if it applies. With that said, let's look at today's topic, to shine or not to shine. We Christians often speak of letting our light shine. Now, of course, the idea focuses around the idea of doing good, godly acts, living right, and overall presenting an image of how someone professing to be a Christian should live. We encourage each other to let our light shine in keeping with the scriptural admonishment from Jesus that's found in the Gospel of Matthew, the 5th chapter, and verses 15 and 16. It says there, "Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." Recently I noticed a roadside sign in front of one of the area churches which read, "Don't hide your light, come shine with us." Now I realized the idea was to encourage people looking for a church to come visit with them. When I read it, however, something just didn't seem right. And the Lord spoke to me immediately saying, "That's the problem." I didn't understand at first what he meant, or why I felt that something just wasn't right about it. So I asked, and God explained that the problem exists in a way we often attempt to build our church attendance. For one thing, our aim should always be to take the message of salvation to those who are on their way to hell, not to persuade people to leave a church they attend in order to come to ours. Another problem rests in the idea of where we might let our light shine. It's easy to act like a good Christian among Christians who are encouraging you to act like a good Christian. God wasn't telling me the sign was purposely conveying the message that I will tell you about, but rather that this message is prevalent in way too many churches. The sign could be construed as an advertisement for Christians, or in other words, members of other churches, to come to this church and express their desire to be Christ-like. Imagine everyone having a flashlight. Now hopefully we have our light switched on most of the time. We gather together with others in our church building who also have their lights on. As we gather together, the room brightens. Eventually the room is so brightly lit, it may even be uncomfortable for some. Although every light adds an amount of brightness to the overall room, at some point the addition of one more light seems rather inconsequential. No one notices when it switches on or even when it turns off. The new lights that have come to shine with us do not enable us to see more clearly. In fact, we reach a point where the increased illumination has started making it more difficult to see clearly. A bedside lamp makes it easy to read a book in bed. But if you replace that lamp with a searchlight, the increased light and heat would make reading impossible. It might even lead to blindness. I submit that many of us become so wrapped up in what's going on inside the parameters of our church, we've become blind to the more powerful aspects of shining our light where it can truly illuminate the darkness. This is what the Lord was telling me when I read that church sign. And he said that was the problem. By and large, Christians have become so concerned with adding to our church numbers that we can't see what's right in front of us. We're blinded. We also don't see when a light goes out or when a new one turns on. At times, we need organized efforts to reach out into our communities. The same can be said for special events aimed at enticing the curious to take the step to visit us. Do we actually need all of these programs? Now, that question might spur a heated explanation from some proponents of various programs and outreaches. Perhaps a more important question would be to ask why we need the various and sundry programs and outreaches popular in many congregations. The simple answer always hinges around the need to spread the message of the gospel and making an appealing invitation to visitors. The root reason goes much deeper, however. Unlike the early church, many of us don't actually share the gospel with others. A few of us may invite a few people to church, and we feel we've done a good thing, which we have. But unfortunately, the small number of people who do make such an invitation, most of them view it as personal evangelism. It's their way of spreading the gospel. Well, inviting someone to church is not the same as explaining the plan of salvation. The number of churchgoers who lead another person to understand and accept the plan of salvation, statistically that stands at about 3%. That means that 97% of the people who believe the main mission of the church is to lead people to know the way to be assured they will go to heaven, never share that message with anyone. It's an indication of the approaching end times. One of the things we're told will happen as the rapture of the church and the subsequent return of Christ draws near is that men will become lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. They will have a godliness about them, but no power. Now, that seems to describe a large number of modern churches. We find ourselves surrounded by those possessing a great knowledge of the Bible, knowledge of the customs of biblical times, and even a vast knowledge of God. They know the nature of God, His principles, instructions, prophecies. They can talk for hours about the meaning of different numbers and their sequences in the Bible. The explanations of how atmospheric events taking place today were foretold in Scripture boggle the mind. Yet even among those calling themselves Christian, the majority scoff at the idea of miraculous healings. Those claiming to give God all the glory for healing first offer directions of the best medicine to take or treatment options available. Speak of praying and believing God first, and you'll be advised how God gave man doctors and knowledge and medicines and good sense. Well, even churches that lay hands on people and pray for their illnesses seem to expect the prayers to take effect after the doctor appointment or after the next dose of medicine. When's the last time someone was prayed for about a malady and announced they saw evidence of the healing without the intervention of the medical world? Now, I realize I'm a bit spoiled since we see this in our church quite often. And I sometimes forget it isn't the norm in most of so-called Christianity. Most of the church world mocks people who act like they really believe God and call them fanatical or even crazy. For the most part, Christianity is like the salt Jesus spoke of. He said when salt loses its savor, it's not good for anything. It can no longer bring out the flavor of food. It doesn't even have a salty taste any longer. It might as well be thrown out on the ground. It's found in Matthew, 5th chapter and verse 13. Jesus said, "Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost his savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is henceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and be trodden under the foot of men." It also references that in Mark, the 9th chapter, and the 50th verse. It says, "Salt is good, but if the salt have lost his saltiness, wherewith will ye season it? Have salt in yourselves, and have peace one with another." And also in Luke, the 14th chapter, and the 34th verse, Jesus said, "Salt is good, but if the salt have lost his savor, wherewith shall it be seasoned?" See, as we draw nearer the time when believers will suddenly be taken out of this world via the rapture, the saltiness of what non-Christians see as the church weakens daily. Far too often, so-called Christians fill the pews of church buildings. We feel spiritual. We're like well-hydrated people, and we continue to drink, and we no longer experience real thirst. We drink out of convenience when we want something. We receive some spiritual tidbit out of habit. In fact, much of what we refer to as the church needs to develop a true thirst. A well-hydrated person consuming salt will become thirsty. The so-called church looks at itself as salt and light, but sadly the majority have become blinded and well-hydrated. Many of us need to develop a true thirst for God and go out into the dark. Even a small match looks bright when it's surrounded by darkness. If we aren't causing those around us to thirst for God and allowing them to see God by the light we project, we have lost our savor, or spend too much time exposed to the light that our own light seems insignificant, at least to us, if not to others. Jesus is about to call his church to leave this earth and meet him in the clouds. Now, I do not wish to cause anyone to doubt their Christianity. I do understand that some may have listened and wondered if I was questioning if they're Christians. Now, some may ask themselves, is he saying if I don't and fill in the blank, I'm not a real Christian, I'm not a true Christian? Well, it makes no difference if I think you're a Christian. If anything I say causes you to question your salvation or the depth of your commitment, the important question is, why? See, we all need to commit daily to putting God's will first. Make him and his will first in our life during that day that is before us. When we begin to get comfortable in our standing with God, we risk becoming lukewarm in our relationship with Christ. At the same time, we are convincing ourselves we're on fire, or at least we're okay in our relationship with God. We don't need a large audience to let our light shine. Most of us that have been Christians for an extended period of time may find ourselves with fewer opportunities to directly speak with groups of non-Christians now than we did in the past. Over time, we may find ourselves speaking less about the need to be saved or even about attending church. If we seek God earnestly, though, he will provide opportunities. For instance, if we speak of the things of God regularly with our family, then the conversation at our dinner table could easily translate to conversation at the restaurant table, where those at nearby tables could eavesdrop. For this to be normal, we must develop the habit of talking about God more than the weather, television, movies, a book, etc., you name it. Where does your conversation center? The Bible tells us out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Well, our speech can be viewed as a gauge to allow us to know what we have put into our heart in the greatest abundance. Are we salt? Are we light? It all depends on where we choose to shine or not to shine. That's our program for today. I'm Bill Witte, thanking you for listening to Redneck Theology. Your questions or comments may be emailed to rednecktheology@gmail.com. Please join me again next time for more Redneck Theology.